Should the Baltimore Ravens sign Melvin Gordon? We talk about that and more with a very special guest next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we've returned here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. And we are back. It is another Purple Friday with our Purple Friday guest. That's former Baltimore Ravens wide receiver, Super Bowl champion, Qadry Ismail. And Q, the Ravens were a bit busy over the weekend, re-signing a couple of key guys. They lost a few players. We'll talk about all that and more today, but how you doing?
Wonderful. I'm in track season mode, so every time the NFL draft comes up, it kind of is a little reprieve from me trying to help my track athletes run and perform their best. But long day, good day, productive day, but ready to talk some Ravens, ready to talk some football.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for this team, I mean, look, they're going to do a bunch of running on the field this year. Hopefully some breakaway, long touchdowns this season. But Q, on the defensive side of the ball, the Ravens made a couple of key re-signings, in my opinion. And Josh Bynes and Calais Campbell, we haven't had a chance to talk about those yet. We've been talking about them, though, throughout most of the offseason about should they bring back these guys. And they decided to do both of them. So let's start off with Josh Bynes. That one happened first. This is obviously a pivot from the Bobby Wagner situation. Josh Bynes is no Bobby Wagner, but I think still a very, very solid player who showed that, as I called him, the savior of that defense, was a stabling presence, good in the run game, and also can give you some solid pass coverage snaps. So, Q, what do you think about that re-signing for this team?
Yeah, I think it's critical to have certain guys who aren't star players when it comes to, the National Football League, but they're star players to your team. They provide levels of depth. They provide levels of security. They provide leadership. I think for Josh, he kind of settled things down. When I say settle things down, you're looking at a position, obviously, with Ray Lewis and just the bar that he set. It's one of those things where you got to bring in a guy that is just strong FBI, knows what exactly to do, how to put guys in position. And so with that all being said, I think Josh Bynes checks off those boxes. He doesn't quite have the talent of a Ray Lewis, but make no mistake about it, I think he's a valuable member to this ball club. They got a new D coordinator, McDonald. Even though he was here before, I think it was really pivotal that you look across the room and you see a Josh Bynes sitting in your room, you feel really good. Hey, look, we're going to put in this defense. He's going to be able to execute it, and we're going to be able to collaborate, because it's not just about what I see on the sideline, but what you see in the game and how you're going to articulate all that to the other players. I need somebody to have that leadership and those set of eyes to get things done. That's what Josh Bynes provides. So I'm sure, I'm missing out on Bobby Wagner. And I know Bobby, from a family decision, he chose to go and stay on the West Coast. And sure enough, that's his prerogative. He got paid well for it. But I think Josh Bynes is a really good fit for what the Ravens are trying to do.
Yeah, this is his fourth stint with the Ravens, and he just keeps coming back for war. The Ravens can't get enough. Bynes can't get enough. And that calming veteran presence, someone who can provide that stability and work with these young linebackers as well, it is a very valuable thing to have. So while people look at Josh Bynes and maybe say, oh, well, he's not the same player he once was, or he's lost a step or this, that, and the other, sure, like he's not 27 years old anymore, but he still provides a ton of value both on and off the field, which I think is great. So no, he's no Bobby Wagner at this point, but I still think for what the Ravens want, he is a great fit. And the other guy who the Ravens just signed over the weekend, Q, it was Calais Campbell, a 2-year deal. about around $12.5 million up to around $16.5 million in full if everything gets hit with some incentives. But I think this is another great signing, a player who, again, on and off the field provided you some things. And I think in the right role where you're not playing them on 70, 80% of snaps, you keep him fresh for the entire year. I think that's the ideal role for him. What'd you think about that signing?
Yeah, again, leadership at the linebacker position, now leadership on the D-line. D-line has been an issue for the Ravens, whether it be injuries to Derek Wolfe or, even Brandon Williams missed time a little bit there. You got Michael Pierce back in the fold. He understands the Ravens' way of doing things, play like a Raven, if you will. Then you look at Calais Campbell, and Calais Campbell really, he was one of those guys that game day, who are we going to call upon to give the other dudes their mental, hey, let's get our minds right after warm-up. Who's that guy that you can turn to? Well, Calais is that guy. And I think he realized, again, after watching Tom Brady do what he did, he realized, you know what? There's something about this game that if you don't have a breakdown as far as your knees and your shoulders and your ankles, and you feel pretty good as far as getting out there and really doing what you need to do from an assignment, from a physicality standpoint, you haven't lost your step. Calais, hey, John Harbaugh and company, they've already put plans into place as far as, load management, if you will. I think this is a good fit for them, and it's a great, strong fit for him. And hopefully, his leadership, his skill level, most importantly, can be that will, put a hurting on Joe Burrow, minimize the benefits of Mitchell Trubisky. Put your team in a position to make some key plays to win, and you can start talking about playoffs and potential Super Bowl.
Yeah, I completely agree. And he wants to win. He's so competitive, and he shows that fire on the field, and he's talked about it. And I agree. I think for what Campbell brings to the field from a leadership perspective, and obviously off of that as well, working with some of the young guys, hopefully, his leadership will rub off even more into some Atabike and Bradrick Washington, etc. I think that's such a huge thing. But kind of following up with Campbell Q, it seemed to be, at least in my opinion, that the Ravens were going to bring back one of Calais Campbell and Brandon Williams. Now with Campbell back in the fold, Michael Pierce now in the fold as well. Do you feel like this is the end of Brandon Williams' time in Baltimore because of those two?
Well, June 1st is going to really decide it. I think that's the cap, second wave of cap casualties, if you will. We really hadn't heard much, though. I don't recall. Maybe he did, and I just missed it. But I hadn't really heard much when it was, talked about with the offseason moves, who basically is going to be that guy to kind of solidify the D-line. And, again, depth-wise, obviously we did hear about Michael Pierce because he clearly is back with the team and all the things, but we really didn't hear much as far as Brandon Williams. So to me, that sounds like a June 1st cap casualty.
Yeah, it feels like if Williams were to return, it would be around then, and the Ravens, maybe if they didn't address their defensive line or something of that sort, then it could happen. But we'll see. There's still a lot of time left, and you're right, there hasn't really been a ton of rumbling surrounding Williams at this point. So we'll see how that market ends up developing. But Q, what's next for you? If in your perfect world, what would the Ravens do next in free agency? Whether it's maybe shoring up the edge position, shoring up corner, what's the next move you'd like this team to make in free agency?
You checked off the box when it came to tackle. You checked off the box when it came to re-signing key veterans at the linebacker and D-line. You've let guys go, so you don't have any longer Tavon Young. You don't have Oestreicher. You don't have Averett. I guess the theme would be let's replace some of those guys that you no longer have on your team. And I think, that therefore, who are some of the free agents that, if the price is right type of thing, you could look at and say, hey, we're going to get this guy and he'd be a good defensive back. He'll be a good, person that you could bring in and, help out your ball club and give you some quality, much needed depth.
Yeah, I mean, at corner right now, you have Marlon Humphrey, you have Marcus Peters, and then you don't really have much else right now if you're the Ravens. So whether that is replacing a guy like Tavon Young with a free agent like Bryce Callahan or Chris Harris, their outside corner, Stephon Gilmore, we've talked about before. There's Joe Hayden as well. Hey, maybe Jimmy Smith comes back, and that's one of their depth signings. There are still some options out there. So I agree. I think for me, signing a corner for the Ravens before the draft, if they were to do so, I think open up some more flexibility in the draft. I still think they draft two regardless. It feels like that's the route they're going down. But I think the next move for me, what I would like to see is for the Ravens to maybe just shore up that cornerback position a little more. But we'll head into our first break. We'll make it back. We'll talk about how the Ravens might shore up their running back position with a potential veteran. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about on Locked On Ravens. So first, I want to tell you a bit about BetOnline, and BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting stats and info. And with March Madness finally over, we can move on to the NBA playoffs, where the Denver Nuggets are facing off against the Golden State Warriors in round one. And a ton of great matchups on the way. And if you want to bet on any of those games, any of those matchups, or MVP odds, be sure to go to betonline.net. Also, you can bet on hockey. Major League Baseball season starting up to the Orioles getting their first couple wins of the season. You can head to the website, use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action, because BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with Qadry Ismail and Q. We talked a bit about the Ravens signings they made on the defensive line and in the linebacker room, or I'll say free signings they made. But there were also some rumors that came out about Melvin Gordon, a free agent running back who is among the best left on the free agent running back market. Now, I think a lot of people took the news in different ways. Some people were super excited about the potential of adding Melvin Gordon. Others were saying, "Oh man, are J.K. Dobbins against Edwards going to be ready? Like, what is this? Is this because of the recovery?" We didn't really know a ton about the news. It was just that the Ravens were potentially working on a deal with Gordon. But do you think, Q, that signing a veteran like Gordon, his deal is not going to likely be a veteran minimum contract, it's going to probably be a couple $1 million per season, is that an investment you would like to see this team make to shore up some depth behind Dobbins and Edwards, depending on their recoveries?
Yeah, so it's interesting because the ACL, I remember Edgerrin James was telling me about this. Edgerrin James, a Hall of Fame running back for the Indianapolis Colts. He and I played with one another in our time. We were teammates in our time in Indy in 2002. And for Edgerrin, he had blown out his knee. It was really devastating, the injury. He was of the mindset that it takes 2 years. The first year or the first 12 months is kind of like, all right, getting your knee back. But then another 6 to 7 months is just getting that soft tissue. There's a term, but basically I'm going to butcher the term. It's a muscle inhibition. In other words, your super fast twitch muscle fibers, they work extremely well. But when you have those breakdowns in the injury, the nerve endings, they don't fire as quickly and sharp. You could be strong as an ox, but you can't really fire off and have that explosivity that you have been accustomed to. What am I trying to say? When you got two guys, the likes of a JK, obviously what Gus Edwards brings to the table, they are going to take some time. You better have a backup plan, and Devontae Freeman is not that backup plan. Okay, now we got that out the way. So that's where, yes, looking at who's available and who can come out there and really help your team out, I think that's what Melvin Gordon brings to your table. He's a smart, obviously a veteran player. He was drafted as one of those guys that were big time explosive and all the things. But again, I think when it comes to Eric DeCosta and them, they recognize the bigger picture of depth and what it means for this ball club, in the short term, while you got your two dudes trying to get back healthy.
Yeah, and also just the whole mental aspect of an ACL injury can be something that is another hurdle to overcome. It's something that some players have it easier than others in that regard. And if one of the two, so Dobbins or Edwards, has some difficulty with the mental aspect, a player like Gordon would be able to help that a little bit. And I think that would be really good for an aspect like that. But Q, kind of a follow-up to your question, since ACL injuries could be that 2-year recovery time, would you feel more confident at this point with a veteran like Gordon or a mid-round running back who had a lot of success in college and is coming out this season? Because for me, I'm not doing both. For me, it's one or the other. It's either you get a Gordon or you draft a running back in the mid-rounds. Which one of those are you going right now, knowing the circumstances behind Dobbins and Edwards?
Well, I mean, technically, I kind of came out and been like, yo, listen, we trying to get all defensive players and be an all defensive draft. That was where I was going. Is that going to happen? No. But I got to be consistent. Outside of that consistency, there got to be some undrafted rookie free agent, that we've seen the Ravens however many years in a row, blah, blah, blah. The statistics were that some undrafted restricted free agent, rookie free agent, somehow, some way they made the team and they contributed and they're contributing really well. Okay, well, let's be a running back. So I'm with you in that you don't necessarily have to draft a guy if you get Melvin Gordon, but the bottom line is they're going to bring in some dudes, even if it is just camp bodies, because I'm not trying to run Melvin Gordon, into the ground during camp. Hey, I'm not winning anything. I'm winning stuff, like, especially if I'm Greg Roman. Like, I got the get out of jail free card when it came to Steve Bisciotti and what he said about me and the criticism and all the things. But I'm not trying to get, Melvin hurt. I need him for the regular season. And that's priority number one. Let these young bucks figure it out and go from there. And then obviously if one of the young bucks flashes and looks great and looks the part, then what? Okay, now we're going to take it to the next level. What is that next level? We got JK, Gus, hey, wait till the next PUP pup list release comes out. Then we'll think about, putting you guys on the active roster. Give them time, because you ultimately know those are your horses. And could you imagine fresh legs come December and January with those two dudes? So let's use up Melvin Gordon's legs. And hopefully it'll be a little bit fresher than Freeman's legs. But anyway, I digress. We're in a position where, yes, let Gordon come in and be the Gordon fisherman.
You're saying Devonta Freeman's name a lot. I feel like that's you subconsciously saying you want him back with the Ravens. So if there's a Melvin Gordon, Devonta Freeman competition in training camp, maybe that happens. But it feels like, like, for example, Tyson Williams, somebody who he was going into a second season last year, but one of those young guys, undrafted free agents. Gus Edwards was an undrafted free agent. And plus, I feel like Gordon, he has been very accomplished, and with the ACL injury just being such an uncertainty, having a veteran, I think that would be a very nice thing to have. But I think for me, it depends on the contract. I personally wouldn't be giving a player like Melvin Gordon like $4 million per season or $5 million per season, because they need other ways to adjust their roster elsewhere with that cap money. So Q, if the Ravens were to make this move and sign Melvin Gordon, what would the ideal contract be for you? Would it be like a 1 year, $2 million deal, 2 years, $3 million? What are you looking at contractually if you're signing Melvin Gordon?
Main thing is giving him the sense that he's going to be on a team, giving him a sense that, his value matters, and give him a chance to get some incentives, some reachable, attainable incentives that will hey, if you perform well, shoot, knock yourself out, we will pay you. But give him an incentive laden contract. You like it, we like it as a team. Okay, cool, go ahead. We're not just being foolish about our money. This is one of those things where everybody wins if it is incentive laden. Because you don't know what really is happening. So it's a little bit in his control, and it's also in the team's control as well.
Yeah, it feels like if those incentives, I mean, one, they're just attainable. It's not like impossible. Like, all right, you have to run for 2,000 yards. There are going to be other mouths to feed in this rushing offense for sure. But I feel like those incentives could go a very long way if the Ravens were to make this move. But what about Gordon the player? How do you feel like he would fit in on this Ravens team based off of what you know about him?
Yeah, I don't know much, so I don't want to overly hype him. I didn't hear anything negative though. That's one of the things. I know he's talented and clearly he has skills. But yeah, I think he's been reliable. From what I've seen, he stayed under the radar. As far as off the field, which is critically important for what the Ravens are liking to do and feeling. But yeah, I just hope he comes in and I think he'd be that guy that, like I said, it's 8 yards looks all well and good, but this is the Baltimore Ravens in the last few years. This is a ball club that you're talking 2,000 yards rushing is like, that's just standard. 100 yards rushing, 110, 120 yards rushing, that's average. We want 160, 180 to be average. Sometimes busting out 253 yards, just rushing and you just dominate in the fourth quarter. So, productive, yes, he's been talented, absolutely. And we really hadn't heard much as far as any locker room negativity. That's a positive as well.
Yeah, he's someone who has been very consistent and reliable on the field, I feel like. And he's a veteran. He's someone who's been around. He knows some of the just inner workings of how to win at the NFL level. And he also has experience working in a committee, especially last season with Javonte Williams over there in Denver. So, yeah, he has experience being a lead back. He has experience working in a tandem. So I think that also is really valuable because in Baltimore, he'd be working in tandem, assuming everybody's healthy, with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. But also I think assuming more of a position than he would be if the two hadn't suffered ACL injuries because of just the recovery that it can take. And just, you talked about the 2-year time frame that you were talking about over there. So I think overall Gordon would be a great signing, assuming the money is right and they don't necessarily throw the entire salary cap at him and all of that. But I feel like overall, if they do make the move and they feel like Gordon would help their team, I would not be opposed to it. I just hope that the money would be in the reasonable range. You mentioned those incentives, Q. I agree with you there for sure. We'll head into our final break here, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into some of the players the Ravens lost over the past week and how the Ravens have replaced them so far. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But first, let me tell you a bit about Built Bar. And so Built Bars, they have a lot that you want in a protein bar. And this is the time of year people pretty much give up on their New Year's resolutions, but don't do that this year. If your resolution is to eat healthy, do that with Built Bar. And Built Bar has these great things called Built Bar Puffs. Super interesting. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow, so that means they're fluffy and they're marshmallowy. And all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, including the puffs. They're low-calorie, high-protein. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. They have a ton of great flavors, too. Mint brownie is my personal favorite. You also have coconut, almond, etc. So go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15. Get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with Qadry Ismail. And thank you again for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft with Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker. The draft's coming up less than 2 weeks here. And side note, this is actually the 700th episode for me on Locked On Ravens. So you're here on a milestone day today.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you. Have never missed an episode. It's been great to cover this team. And of course, talking to you every week and diving into this team and the Devonta Freeman happenings, obviously. But yeah, that's another milestone day. So that's something cool I wanted to shout out there. But even this Q, the Ravens have lost some free agents this offseason. And they've lost a lot of them. And they lost a ton this past week, with the recent happenings being both DeShon Elliott and Sammy Watkins. But first, Tavon Young signing with the Chicago Bears. And this was like Tavon Young got cut by the Ravens. He was not coming back after being cut unless something miraculous happened. But Q, the Ravens, you kind of talked about in the cornerback room, that's the next move you would like to see. What is your confidence level right now that with the people on the roster, they could go out there and replace Tavon Young on the field? You could move Marlon Humphrey into the slot if you wanted to and kind of have that. But is that the best move that they can make there?
I think his pectoral muscle compared to where you would see like an ACL, in the slot, it's different because it's a two-way go. You gotta you're also up in there on the run action. You just got to be careful with it, and that's where I don't know if it would be in my best interest to just put him in that slot. And that's where I think you would either continue to scour the free agent market, but also draft some dude. Like I don't know. I don't know if I feel comfortable with him out in the slot. Give me his game on the outside. I think that's where I'd be most comfortable.
Yeah, and you can play him in the slot if you have to, but I feel like he's a better corner on the outside. And
Yeah.
like the team, it feels like the team really likes him in the slot. And look, he's a good slot cornerback. He has shown that in multiple seasons where he's had to kind of be forced into that role. But the Ravens have these, I mean, like interesting hybrid players like Brandon Stevens, Ardarius Washington, who can play in the slot. And it feels like the team views Ardarius Washington more as a slot piece anyway. And maybe it's the same thing with Brandon Williams, but I feel like Brandon Stevens, he's more of a do it all around type player. But I feel like with those two, they have options, but I feel like they should also invest a little more in the position. They don't have a lot behind those two. But Q, a position that the Ravens do have a lot in is the safety position. And DeShon Elliott signing with the Detroit Lions on a 1-year deal. So congratulations to him and his next journey. But the Ravens did some good in replacing DeShon Elliott very early in the free agent period with Marcus Williams. So how excited are you for Marcus Williams to come in, replace DeShon Elliott? And what are the differences you see, or at least of, between those two that you could really see Marcus Williams making an impact?
So I think right off the bat, the safety position for the Ravens has been one of the strong suits outside of Elam. I think this is a case where you have a guy who, on film, what you saw when he was with the Saints, played that position to the level that the Ravens like and covet. What does that mean? Like, you're in a position where you need to make a play. And I like DeShon Elliott, but when it comes to, from pass defense, pass breakup, fumble recovery, interceptions, being in the right position, putting other guys in the right position, Marcus Williams did that. Okay. So, this game is about making plays. Who can make plays? You make plays, you get paid. You don't make plays, you don't get paid. And I think for him, it was a good opportunity for his youth and for him being youth body wise, but his cerebral portion of the game is at its peak right now. He's going to get better as he learns and adapts and adjusts, but it's at its peak right now. He sees and has seen enough to really be able to slow the game down for himself. And I think that's something that DeShon and company, they were good. There's nothing negative. I appreciate his time here in Baltimore in purple and black. But the Marcus Williams era begins, and I'd be curious to see what he brings to the table. What I mean by that is, is it where is it at? Is it Jim Leonard? Is it Eric Weddle? Or is it Ed Reed level? I'll take all three. That means he's playing well. But what level are we going to be able to see him play?
Yeah, I'm super excited for Marcus Williams. And I do want to give DeShon Elliott a lot of credit, though, because we all know how the Earl Thomas situation ended and just what bind that put the Ravens in, because it literally happened about 2 weeks before the regular season started that year. The Ravens couldn't really pivot to the free agent market because there was no one left. And so they go to this guy who hadn't really played a ton because of injuries. And they say, hey, DeShon, we need you to start at free safety for us, a position. He came out as a strong safety. So he ended up playing really well in that role during the 2020 season. And I think making a name for himself. Obviously, the key story for him was injuries, 3 season enders in 4 seasons, which is always a killer. But I feel like for what Elliott brought to the field for the Ravens, he was very good. And it just came down to probably the health for him and the Ravens needing a bit more durability there. And Marcus Williams does provide that durability. He's barely missed any games in his 5-year career. So I'm excited to see what he brings to the table. But finally, Q, Sammy Watkins leaves, going to the Green Bay Packers, a 1-year deal for him. And we've talked about Sammy Watkins. We assumed he wasn't coming back, both of us. And now this confirms that going to the NFC North. But now it leaves, I guess, a hole in the Ravens receiving core that could be filled if you're keeping 6 wide receivers, potentially by Miles Boykin, potentially by a draft selection, and potentially by a veteran. We've talked about the veteran receiver aspect too, but how would you go about replacing this wide receiver in Sammy Watkins that is now departed from a Ravens uniform?
So I guess if you look back on it, I was the first to start the whole free agent thing at the wide receiver position. And, it morphed into, the guys that we all see as household names when it comes to the likes of Anquan Bolden and obviously Steve Smith Sr. Just really left a strong, indelible mark on everyone here in Baltimore. And I think that's something that, is really awesome. With all that said, I think Sammy was kind of hoping, and we as fans and people who cover the team was hoping that, okay, bro, let's do this now. Come on. But the problem is, he just, when you needed him most, you didn't see him. He came in strong and did some things really well, I thought, in Detroit. And, he caught that huge 4th down play. But when you need to make plays at the end of the year, that Miami game, I'm like, dang it, that was it for me. It just felt like, you're hurt all the time. We knew you were coming in. You were trying to redeem your career. We were hopefully that, you would reunite with Greg Roman, and you knew his system and blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line comes down to it is that, it just didn't work out. And I think, we'll see how he fits in with Aaron Rodgers. He's a very, 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 very poor man's Devontae Adams. And, we'll see like how it works out for him there in Green Bay. But his time here, it was unremarkable.
Yeah, and I do like the Detroit 4th and 19. He caught that game-tying touchdown, and it would have been game-tying touchdown in Pittsburgh. It feels like he had those big
Even
moments.
in Chicago, he had a huge moment in Chicago.
He did. He did have the one in Chicago. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, in the 4th quarter when we were sitting there hoping that they were kind of get back into things. Sammy had another big catch and took it into the deep into the red zone, I believe it was, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he had a ton of big moments, and
Miami.
That's what it comes down to. I was just about to say, it comes down to Miami, where you're that Lamar Jackson floats that ball, and whether it was the lights or the goal post or whatever it was, it just falls in front of him, and you're thinking, how can you not catch that football? How can you not make the effort to go catch that football? And we never really know. I don't know if he ever said anything about what happened. Did he say anything to you? Do you remember?
No, I don't. I think he thought it was in the back of the end zone, out of the end zone, I think is what he thought it was. But then you look at the video and it's like, nah, bro.
Yeah, no, it falls right in front of his face. And
that's a catchable ball. That wasn't, that wasn't Lamar. That wasn't Greg Roman. That's, yo, bro, you got to catch that ball. Catch that ball. You're a hero. You're eating crab cakes for life.
Yeah, and it's not just you, just browsing through Twitter. That moment seemed to be the moment that people were like, all right, what are we doing here? Like that seemed to be the moment. So in terms of replacing him, how they would do that, I think they have some of the answers on the roster already. Devin Duvernay, James Prochet, those guys deserve shots to prove themselves. But at the same time, if Watkins was brought back to the Ravens, the role probably wouldn't have been as big. It would have been more like his second half of the year, which he didn't really do anything overly spectacular over the second half of the season. So while Watkins did have those great moments, and those will always live on, like the 4th and 19, that will always be how the Ravens got into field goal range for Justin Tucker in that moment. So we had some great moments, but at the same time, I feel like a mid-round receiver or maybe even an earlier round one would be the best option to replace, or also a veteran, which we have talked about, like a potential Julio Jones or Jarvis Landry. But I feel like Watkins, the ship had kind of sailed there, unfortunately. So, grateful for everything he did, but also it just wasn't anything overly spectacular, unfortunately. I know a lot of people had high hopes for him, definitely. But Q, that's all I have for you today. Thanks so much for coming on here and talking Ravens football. And when we talk next, the draft will be less than 1 week away. What about that?
I just think this is the time of the year where there's so much misdirection. I can't wait for the draft to start up. Why? Because we won't have misdirection. You're going to know who's going to be on the team. You can then look it up and kind of, see what the potential is. And then obviously, you get your mini camps, and then you can really see how things are progressing with guys. Last year we saw what Bateman did. We saw what Prochet. We saw, Duvernay. We saw some of the younger guys and all those different elements put together to put this Ravens team on the map. And so can we just get the draft on so we can figure out who's going to be where and why, and as opposed to all this guessing makes my ring light turn off and on.
And soon we will figure out those rookies and the guys who will be coming into the team. And soon that means there'll be no more mock draft Mondays here on Locked On Ravens. And when we get back here on Monday, we'll be doing a mock draft where the Ravens trade down for more value. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you on Monday.